Test. Good. Welcome again. Let's slowly start here with paper session number 5, the final paper session of Expanded 2025. We have 5 great works here, 4 art papers and 1 research paper. And I'm very happy to announce Celine and Jolanda, who will present the first paper. And it's always great to be session chair of a works that I was at least a little bit involved with, but looking forward to your presentation now.
Distortions are usually seen as mistakes, something to correct or avoid. But in this paper, we want to show how AI distortions can serve as an aesthetic and even narrative feature. This is explored in our animated short film Brush AI Distorted Dreams, which reimagines the archival drawings of the Austrian artist Clemens Brosch. And instead of aiming for perfection, we tried that the project embraces these anomalies as a part of its visual language. And to understand how the distortions emerged and how we worked with them, let's start briefly with the workflow behind the project. So after developing the storyboard, which included 30 paintings of the artist, each image had to be prepared in Photoshop, so cropped, resized, and even expanded to a format of 16:9. And for animating the paintings, we explored several workflows. One involved Comfy UI with project mapping in Blender, so generating 3D render passes and feeding them into Stable Diffusion. Another workflow tested a LoRa model trained on Brosch's style to apply his painterly characteristics to the AI animations. And these experiments helped us to understand how the AI reacts on the Brosch's paintings. However, the results didn't satisfy us. So in the end, we mostly used the third tested workflow, where we mainly used the online tools like Runway, Luma Dream Machine, Hyper, and Kling AI. And in order to keep control over the results, we used start, middle, and end frames, along other parameters like prompts and so on, so that the AI could interpolate smoothly the way we wanted. And we chose this workflow with the online tools because the produced animations were as true as possible to the Brosch's originals, like his style.
So the results, of course, were not always perfect, especially when it came to animating figures, humans, or animals. The AI often struggled. For example, in the last moment, the AI animation gave the scene depth and movement, but also came with glitches. The shoes and limbs got a bit wrapped. The figures looked wobbly in their stance, faces turned blurry, the code textures became rough and fuzzy, and even the shadows don't always make sense compared to the original drawing. In Crocodile on the Moon disc, the AI couldn't really handle this hybrid creature. Instead of a crocodile, it just dissolved into strange amorphous shapes that broke the logic of the original drawing. By contrast, and in detailed study of the left hand, the fingers started morphing in odd ways, sometimes even disappearing completely. By contrast, when it came to landscape and architecture, the results worked much more smoothly. There we could simply use camera moves like pans and zooms, and the AI convincingly extended the depth of the image. Since these scenes didn't require complex anatomical motions, the animations felt much more smoothly and immersive. So in short, landscapes and buildings were easy to handle, but as soon as figures or body parts were involved, the problems appeared.
As we can see, mistakes do happen and cannot always be avoided. And we realized that at some point during our production time. We generated a lot of footage, but we realized that even if we try our best, we find ourselves failing, because there will always be imperfection at some degree. So in a moment of, I would say, a little frustration, we thought, okay, what if we ask ourselves the wrong question? Maybe we should not think about how to avoid them, but instead ask ourselves the question how we can use and embrace these distortions. So this is exactly what we did. We shifted our focus from avoiding distortions to embrace distortions by using these AI mistakes as an aesthetic and narrative feature, letting it influence and enhance our workflow, and even let it shift the deeper meaning of the animation.
So once we made the decision, it changed the way we approached the whole project. In editing, we stopped cutting out the distorted moments and started highlighting them instead. They became a focal point that added intensity. In the music and sound design, we leaned into those glitches, using sound to amplify the strange, unsettling atmosphere they created. And narratively, they opened a deeper layer. Many distortions echoed themes from Brush's own life, his morphine addiction, his struggles with mental health, and the sense of inner collapse you see in his later drawings. So when figures dissolved or a body warped unnaturally, we connected it directly to those psychological themes. What began as a technical error became a storytelling tool. The distortions didn't just animate Brush's images, they helped us reflect his life and his struggles. They added something meaningful.
So AI changed our way of thinking and how we approach the project. But what are our final thoughts? On one hand, the distortions highlight the limitations of current AI tools. Obviously, sometimes figures don't move quite right, or details are lost, or the AI interprets things in unexpected ways. But should we really see it as a limitation? We think these so-called mistakes can also be opportunities. They create a new visual language that blends authenticity with unpredictability. What might have been a static, archival drawing becomes dynamic, alive, and surprising at the same time. And there's a lot more potential here than we have been explored so far. And the second thought we had during this project was that AI can act as a creative partner rather than just a tool. As we can see, where it opened up new ways to interact with cultural heritage.
So, if you are interested in experiencing this on a larger scale, our full deep space presentation takes place today at 3 p.m. downstairs at the Deep Space. There we will screen the complete Brush AI Distorted Dreams film and also present some of Brush's largest fascinating works as gigapixel images. So you can zoom in, look at the canvas, look at the scratches and painting mistakes. And we also invited some special guests, so don't miss it, and we would love to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions in the audience? There's one.
Hi. Thank you for the talk. I was wondering, because obviously Brush is dead for some time now, and a lot of concern with AI today is that it steals from artists, a lot of people say, and a lot of artists don't like their works being used with AI, which is completely understandable in my opinion. And I was just wondering if you've seen any ethical concerns in your work process, taking images from the artist and doing all this stuff with AI with them. If you get what I mean.
Thank you for the question. And yes, it's a really valid question. For context, Clemens Brosch is dead for over 70 years. So legally you have the right to use his images. We also have the consents of the museums where we use their archives and so on. But our goal was not to like replace his images or say, oh, look, here we have the alive version, this is better. We wanted to try to bring his images alive the way he would have seen it maybe. Or, yeah. So the goal was not to replace it, but to like expand it, obviously, in a modern interpretation.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
Expanded, that's the name of the conference too. Great. Do we have more questions? Please.
Thank you. So I would be interested in the very moment when you started to embrace the distortion. So what was the impulse, the thought process? What was the shift here?
It was so frustrating to to seek perfection. So at one point we thought, okay, we have fun or we destroy ourselves. So at some point we talked to Jürgen and Vicky, and they told us, let's try something else, because it was more like an experiment than something else. So we had the chance to embrace something like that, yeah.
Thank you.
Don't see any more hands. Raise your hands. Okay. I'd say we thank the authors again for the nice presentation, and we come up to the next one. Another round of applause first. We can use these few extra minutes because our next presenter, Mona, told me her presentation will be slightly longer, so this extension now gives you the possibility to still ask some questions to her paper, Resonant Atmospheres, the Techno-Performance of Affection.
We can shut our eyes, but not our ears. Sound's affective operation stems from its invisible charge that is not readily accessible, knowable, or controllable. Sound can enter into the non-conscious, precognitive register of the affective, the liminal space between the embodied and the emotional. In the affective zone, bodies co-create the mood of a space. The affect flows and moves across, creating atmospheric conditions that are felt beyond cognition. Okay, so I will walk you through my project working with this idea of the affective flow that I just introduced. Using biosensors, the devices that I'm going to just unpack in a minute for you, and the way that the readings of these sensors can fold into visuals and sonic representations. So first I'll introduce some concepts, then I'll introduce some experiments, and finally some takeaways. So at the onset of the time that I learned about biosensing, I also learned about this field called affective computing that claims that it's through data processing that we get at emotions, as if emotions are discrete and universal. So these techniques of capturing physiological markers from the body, of course, weren't born yesterday. They're part of a scientific tool set for lie detection, or if you've heard of the polygraph testing, that picks up markers from the body like the blood pressure, respiration, and skin conductivity. But the validity of these tests, of course, has been controversial, as they take a spike in the measurements as necessarily an indicator of stress, and stress is necessarily an indicator of lying. And this is also the kind of semantic leap that affective computing also makes. But in the case of affective computing, it is the force of pervasive computation and data processing techniques that look at these measurements not only as real-time signals, but also as data that can be systematically logged, analyzed, and interpreted to mean emotions. So what I'm interested in is retooling or repurposing these technoscientific apparatus as basically taking a departure from the way that they reduce complexity of emotions to build instead what I call affective atmospheres, that I look at it as an actionable way of critiquing these technical workflows. So a typical commercial device normally house or couch these four sensors within them. So the blood volume pulse that typically measures what's closest to your pulse rate, if you like, and I work with derivatives from them, as you can see here. Electrodermal activity, or what I refer to as skin conductivity, the microperspiration on the skin, accelerometer XY axis representing the motion, and thermometer the skin temperature. So here's the research question that I had working within this project. So in essence, I was asking what happens if you take the technological not for what it stands for, but for what it doesn't deliver. So looking at its generative possibilities and its failure and putting it against the thematic of migration. And in doing that, I work with these triad of dimensions that you see here. So the thematic of displacement, the retooling of technoscientific apparatus, and using artistic strategies to tap into this peculiar imaginary built by the big tech to have us think that these devices can give access to the true body, so the body that intrinsically we don't have access to. So here are the concepts that I'm going to quickly cover. But you might be asking at this point, why biosensors? If you want to tell a story of migration, why not going for straightforward storytelling? So at the onset of my experience of migration, I find myself struggling to pick the right words to explain how I feel as a migrant and in response to questions that were asked from me. So the messiness and the discomfort that I sensed in my body was not something that I could put into words. So when I conceptualized the project, I went back to these moments of miscommunication, if you like, so where I struggled to put the discomfort of what I felt, the intensity that I felt, but I couldn't put them into words. So then I formulated this concept in communication as one word, as you can see here, as follows. I say, if miscommunication is thought of as a rupture in communication, where other processes or actions are set in motion, I see these excesses not as a lack, but as an entry point into a new way of communication using biosensors and their transformation into sound and visuals to transfer over the intensity of my experience of migration. So here are the experiments. So the earlier experiments were predominantly what I call performer-centric experiments. So they positioned me as a solo performer and the audience as mere onlookers to these visual and sonic manifestations that were taken as the real-time transformation of the biosensor that I was wearing around my wrist. So there was this clear separation between the audience and the performer, and the observed and the observer dynamic, if you like. What I was interested in was a shift to participation. So what I was interested in was that affective flow that I talked about in the very beginning. So how to share an intensity, but not have others just observe an intensity. So I shifted to this participatory mode where audiences pass the wearable among one another, and each person's sensor data would fold into this loop of sound and visuals. So here, if you look at the left diagram, and that's supposed to kind of represent a technical dimension of what happens here as a classic cybernetic loop that goes from the body to the sensor reading to then sound and images. And if you like basically the body produces the signals are transformed into sound and visuals, they go ahead and affect the body again, and the body produces a new set of signals, and so on and so forth. This loop continues. What the second part, which was the participatory part, was interested in was actually this network of bodies that you see on the right side. So how to create a network of body towards affective flow. And in doing that, not to treat bodies as nodes in a system, and at the same time not flattening differences, but thinking of sharing an intensity as a process of involvement rather than detached observation. But in doing that, unfortunately, or fortunately, not all participants went along with this kind of experience, given that the integrity of the self was not immediately clear in this loop of interconnected bodies. That means the transformation from one body to the other was not something that was foregrounded upfront for participants. So here, as I just mentioned, you have these two kind of modalities, the sonification and what I call data responsive images. So basically the idea is to implicate all bodies into this loop. So I'm going to talk about sonification, and you will be able to see that in a minute in a video, but data responsive images were essentially videos, already existing videos, reminiscent of my experience of migration. And what happened was here, as you can see, the pulse rate data would control the properties of the image. Here, the glitch and distortion effect to create what I call embodied images. So even though the idea sounds quite interesting and somewhat sentimental to have participation included in this loop, it was quite a naive idea to think that audiences can simply swap spaces with the performer by handing the verbal to them and expecting them to perform as a performer. So this means that there was quite a bit of anxiety handling this unknown black box device, not knowing its operation exactly, and having the expectation that the audience are not only able to wear it properly, but are able to also pass it on to others properly. So there was generally a general feeling of being lost. So I tried to remedy this kind of anxiety with introducing another phase, which is I call an onboarding phase. So the onboarding phase essentially was a technical demo that was introduced before the actual performance, and it would introduce the audiences to basically the biosensor, what it is, and the fact that it can have both visual and sonic representation. So for them to learn that this is possible by wearing it. But the problem was the overspilling of this play and discovery mode into the performance that was supposed to be or built to be an intense experience about migration. There was essentially a jarring transition between these two phases. So I ended up introducing many micro phases between the onboarding phase and the actual performance to remedy that, to make up for that jarring transition. And I don't have time right now to introduce all of those micro transitions, but something peculiar that happened through introducing these transitions was the fact that the audience picked up my gesture of helping one of the participants wearing the biosensor and replicated that act. That means every person helped the next person wear the biosensor device. So for the very first time, instead of the biosensor acting as a source for anxiety, it became a physical source of interconnecting participants to one another as a ritual. So here in this 1-minute video, you're able to see that operation as well as look a bit and understand maybe how sonification works. So here's a 1 minute. Okay, so thanks for coming along in the sprint. Here's the conclusion. So ultimately, through all these experiments, I was able to build the intensity that I was looking for in some shape and form, and for some participants, but not for others. And I acknowledge the incoherence that the project created by disrupting what I call matters of fact, doing a couple of, or many in essence, maneuvers outside the normative space. And here are some of them that I summed up here for you. So working with the thematic of exiled migration without a straightforward narrative, as I talked about discussing the concept of incommunication, was a way to unsettle the figure of the traumatized migrant woman worthy of empathy. Mobilizing the affective flow while facing pushbacks against the disillusion of the I, as I introduced to you when I talked about that network diagram and the fact that it's not upfront and people don't understand their role, was a way to disrupt the realities of liberal individualism and the right for discovery. And subverting a technical operation while dealing with its alienating after effects, as you saw with all the confusions around wearing the device and passing it around, was a way to debunk the technoscientific object processes as truth-making machines. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We have some questions for Mona. I do have a question. How should I say this? I mean, a lot of the research you spoke of was, of course, coming from tools like surveillance or lie detection. But in general, like a goal of pervasive computing application is to build something nice and provide value to the user. And I would argue to some degree you did it too. So isn't what you did also a traditional ubiquitous computing system somehow?
This is, I mean, what I like to think of this project was more of what are the possibilities to actually retool or subvert a technology that already exists. So it's not about, let's say, like paradigms like experimental computing that you go ahead and try to kind of reframe, reformulate, remake essentially a new technology either out of an already existing one or out of itself altogether. So it was about, this technology is already there. I know its limitations. I know what it does and what it doesn't do. And knowing all this stuff, I'm interested to kind of use it for something else. If these devices are all about essentially the individual and individuation, because if you're familiar with these movements like quantified self, et cetera, or Fitbits, or all of these smartwatches that everyone wears on a daily basis, it's all about, I want to know more about myself, and I want to improve myself. I want a better version of myself. And what I wanted out of this device was actually get out of that kind of, it's all about me, and it's all more about inwardness and inside the body, and how can we actually use this device as a way of creating a level of interconnection across participants.
Thank you. Some more questions popping up. Then I go with another one. So would you see the risk that like tech companies see your work and say, okay, that's cool, let's make a Spotify visualization based on people's body signals and sell it? So.
I mean, there are many of these projects. If you just walk around and look at what things are being done with biosensors, there are actually a lot of similar projects that you just described. And they're attractive, and of course, they go under the rubric of interactive art, and anything that's an interactive installation has this very strong magnetic lure because it's all about me and how I know myself through a representation that's out there. Of course, it's always super attractive for the user to get to know themselves through different representations. But my project was really not about that. It was actually try to counter essentially like ideas about me, myself, and I kind of thing. So. Cool.
Thank you so much. And another round of applause for Mona. And we come to the next paper. It's called Implementing AI-Driven Frame Interpolation for a Handcrafted Animated Watercolor Film. And the presenters are Hannes Sturm and Vincent Maurer.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here. I'm Hannes Sturm and I'm here with Vincent Maurer to talk a bit about AI interpolation for watercolor animation. We are both recent graduates of the Film Academy. You already heard earlier this day about what the Animation Institute is doing, and now we want to talk a bit about what the students are working on. We both studied technical directing at the Animation Institute, and during our studies we work with different departments together with directors and producers, for example, on different projects, such as the graduation film Sensual, which is a 2D animated short film with about 3 minutes of animation, and it shows the sexual foreplay as a sensual experience. Instead of different shots being cut together, it unfolds as one continuous animation, featuring animals that transform into each other, appear and vanish as they explore the human body.
Our director, Tanja Neuten, wanted to bring her detailed painting style into the film without compromising her artistic identity. So she wanted to make a film that had the style of the paintings she created. She realized that animation needs a lot of images, a couple of thousand of them, making her high-effort painting style kind of difficult to scale, as she was the only painter that actually could achieve her style. As a sole painter, it was kind of impossible to do that, so she had to find a way to produce her film without compromising her quality. When the image generators kind of started appearing, she was first really seeing them as a threat to her as an artist, but later realized that it couldn't only be a threat to her, but could also be a very useful tool for her in her productions. And she hoped he could replicate her style with some AI tools to make her film actually possible. Avina, the producer, and Tanja evaluated different models, classical 2D interpolation stuff and also different AI models, but pretty early realized that they couldn't get where they wanted with the results. And this is where we, Hannes and I, came in to support their R&D journey and finding their workflow to create a film. At first, Tanja created a test animation that you can see on the bottom here. It's a 2D line art animation. And she then printed out the animation on watercolor paper and painted it meticulously by hand with watercolors, and then scanned it in. So we had this reference animation of what the animation was supposed to look like, and a couple of paintings from specific frames of the animation. Those would be called keyframes. Those are the frames you can see here painted. And then the in-between frames, those are the line art frames, are the frames we wanted to recreate using interpolation models or AI. And you can see here, this is an animation of the images she painted. And it's like a little bit jittery because the frame rate is pretty low. So that's where we came in to create more frames to make the animation smoother, basically. After we had all these frames, we went in and did some tests.
Yeah, so we started with a traditional image processing technique called optical flow, where we directly transitioned from one keyframe to the other, but we very soon realized that we had many issues going on, for example, warping textures and a pulsing artifact with the animation. We kept the idea of optical flow, but tried another tool called EBSynth, which is a standalone tool which deforms a texture of a style image according to a reference animation, which was in our case the outline animation. It looked a lot better, but still the image quality was not sufficient for us. Then we tried out Stable Diffusion as an image generating AI, but as you can see, it hallucinated a lot. Also, we had big ethical concerns about the training data of the AI, since we didn't train it on our own style. We attempted later to train a LoRa model on our own style, but we still had some artifacts going on, and yeah, since we didn't have enough training data. Then we took a bit of a step back from image generating AIs to in-between AIs, which were specifically trained to generate in-between frames. And although they were trained on realistic video footage, they performed pretty well for our stylized frames as well. We tried different tools like the Google Film AI, Topaz Video AI, and the latest one, Rive. We had a couple of issues with our tests. First of all, we had the pulsing artifact, which has the reason because the system tries to interpolate linearly between frames instead of following a motion arc, which we want as a 2D animator. We had morphing artifacts where objects morphed into each other. We had a lack of detail, and also double images where you can see the past keyframe and the next keyframe kind of blended together.
Going through all the tests, we tried to compile what worked well and what didn't work well to inform also future decisions for the animation. We saw that very linear movement, so movement that doesn't have a lot of animation arcs, performed really well for interpolation. Very slow movements, where there's not a lot of difference between frames, also works well. Detailed textures, interestingly, also performed pretty well in interpolation, and very consistent objects that didn't really change a lot. They also worked pretty well for the interpolation. Things that didn't work were very rapid changes in movement, so when a character would move there and then back, for example. Very abstract movements, like the morphing we wanted to have in our film, like animals transitioning into each other, had problems. And things like newly merging objects, low scene contrast, and thin outlines also posed some problems. At the end, we wrote down an evaluation of the different tools, which you also can find in the paper if you want to read more about it. As we still had to make a film, we had to decide for something. And we decided to use Rive, which, as you can see here, showed very detailed images that were nearly undiscernible from the actual animation. This is why we went with it. You can still see here the pulsing problems, like this very strong pulsing, and also some smaller detail morphing problems. And we were able to get rid of those by one, interestingly reducing our frame rate. So at first we wanted to create 2 in-betweens per frame. We decided to reduce that to just 1 in-between, which allowed us to create a lot smoother appearing animation for some reason. I think it's because there's less frames that are interpolated. And also adding some traditional compositing techniques and a little trick I'm going to show you. Our workflow looked like that. We had our painted images. We would scan them using a copy scan stand. Then we would denoise them, so we would get rid of the paper structure, so it didn't get interpolated. Normalize the values, so they all would have the same brightness, and then did an interpolation pass. Actually, we did 3 interpolation passes. We had 1. This is the default interpolation in Rive. Then we mirrored the image, so we flipped it, interpolated it again, and then flipped it back, which ended with a slightly different result, and you can already see where it's going. And then we also did a 3rd interpolation to have some more variance, which just changed some parameters. And there you can see this very organic appearance. It's kind of the images don't look perfectly interpolated. They have slight variations, and those would then get randomly switched for each frame. So the interpolation wouldn't be linear and a bit more random. And we then applied some random distortions to the image based on the original image, added some brush textures on top to give it a bit more structure, and then added back the paper structure to the image. As you can see it here, this is with a structure applied to it, ending up with this final shot for our test sequence. It's still not perfect, but pretty close to what we wanted. After that, our director went back, adjusted the style a little bit to also make painting a little more efficient, and ended up with this shot that ended up in the final film. To conclude everything, we learned that we can strategically combine AI interpolation and traditional compositing and hand painting to actually achieve a substantial reduction in production time. We estimated about 200 working days of just painting the frames which is about 800 frames, to 1600 frames, to about 100 days of painting, having to paint only 800 frames and interpolating the other half. This workflow, we think we can also use as a foundation for other hand-painted animation projects, which just needs some changes probably for the animation style. And we believe that AI should act as an augmentative tool for artists and not as a mere replacement. So we think we can use AI tools, like in our case, to aid an artist and not to replace the artist, which is quite important for us. On that note, we would like to say thank you to Expanded for having us. And yeah, if you want.
Yeah, you can scan the QR code if you want to read more about it. You can find the paper and some supplementary videos on there, or yeah, just connect with us via email or catch us at the conference.
Thank you. A round of applause. Again, the round is open for questions. So while you really think of questions this time, I do my question. I would be interested in the time frame of when you did this project, and if you redid it in the meantime, because there are new video AI tools are coming every day. Some have these keyframe features these days to imagine some sequence of images between two keyframes.
So the project started in 2023, I think, when there was first started and the first tests were happened. And back then, I think our director really was certain that we could use AI tools to do the interpolation without having done the tests yet, which is definitely something that's a little it's a little bit tough. And we realized, as you've seen from all the tests, that it's not something you can just plug and play. You need to find your solution that fits your problem. I think the way we worked would still be valid, I think, as we didn't want to give away all the artistic vision to an AI model, but just wanted to use it as a tool that helps the process. There's definitely newer models there. I think our workflow that we use could still be used. The project just finished a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, I think we could still use that kind of process with other models too.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, then thank you again. Another round of applause. We hand over to the next presenter. It's Nairi Elzavi for the paper Memotions Designing a Participatory Animated Film with Cherished Objects.
Hi everybody, I'm Nairi from Lucas School of Arts, and today I will shortly present a participatory animated film prototype that we've been working on as part of my PhD also. So the title of the film is Memotions, and it is a participatory animated film with cherished objects that encourages and challenges participants to rethink their own personal objects as a cultural heritage. It encourages them to make animations with these objects and share it, and then it weaves together all these animations. It's in own storyline. So to quickly go to the background of the project, we aim to respond to the loss of cultural heritage and forced displacement due to conflict, and we focus on Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh, which is a region in South Caucasus, and which been influenced by a lot of conflict and geopolitical conflicts. And the latest conflict, which started in 2022, it forced people to leave their region, and so it causes a lot of forced displacements. And also it was heavily documented, and it was noticeable that people are carrying with themselves objects that they cherish, their personal objects, and though these objects could seem very everyday objects or negligible, they are the most authentic representations of heritage, what people cherish, what people want to pass pass on, and they encapsulate these stories and memories from these people. So we investigate animation making with these objects, and we use stop motion technique, which is a technique that enables makers to create stories by physical materials, physical objects. And we focus on participatory animation making with these objects, and we investigate how we can enable and empower individuals, non-experts, and specifically displaced individuals to reflect on their own personal objects through animation making process. And we do this through the design and evaluation of emotions. And we ask how we can do this and how it can affect individuals. So very fast, some concepts that we rely on is participatory design practices that enables, as I mentioned, non-experts to be cultural agents, to create their own narratives, as opposed to just being passive viewers. So it challenges the top-down model of who is an author, who is an artist, and who is a viewer. Also, we study interactive films, interactive animations, and specifically how interactive films use animation and how they enable interactions. And we mostly we notice that mostly, in most cases, interaction is limited to doing some actions or walking around, which these actions generate animations, and participants are not creating and contributing their own animation. And this is what we wanted to do, to enable participants to create. So we design emotions following a research through design approach, in which we kept refining our prototype based on user studies and based on the feedback from users. I also, myself, rely on my own design judgment as a person who has experienced displacement. So before designing Memotions, I have conducted a couple of workshops with the diaspora community and displaced communities residing in Europe. And based on the insights and based on my learnings, we have translated these workshops into a participatory narrative, which I will explain later. And then we first created a video, a non-interactive video, and then little by little we added interactive elements to it through using Adobe XD or Figma. And then we conducted user studies, asking participants, recruiting participants from semi-public places, let's say from cafes, shops, so participants that are not normally engaged in interactive films and are not familiar with interactive film. And then based on that, we refined our prototype and moved it into a web-based platform to be able to also collect and archive the animations. So when a user or a participant enters the film, and I also have to mention that the film took the shape of a smartphone application because of its portability, because of its camera functionality, and low entry point. So they first see a narrative, an opening narrative about how displaced individuals pack their belongings, their cherished objects. It's a bit kind of a documentary narrative. And then they are invited to reflect on their own objects. If you had to move, what would you take with you? If, what objects do you have that they are important to you, they are significant for you, they contain stories for you. And then the participants are encouraged to think of human emotions, feelings, characteristics in their objects. This is because we wanted to help them to reflect and empower them to reflect on their own object through imagining the object having human feelings and human characteristics. And then they are encouraged to make an animation with very simple and basic guidelines, and they are asked if they are comfortable with sharing the animation. And then if they share, they see animations created by participants before them, and the emotions weave together these animations to its final storyline. So we did many user studies, but 10 of them I interviewed with them. I documented the data that was generated through these user studies. As you can see, the objects that users chose to animate, they vary from photograph to jewelries to keys, very maybe everyday objects also. And the participants were also from diverse backgrounds and age groups. And so participants, mostly they imagined human traits in their objects. They created very basic animations. And it was also noticeable that the created animations were not perfect. They were not professionally made. It was noticeable. And we could see signs of camera shake, hands in the picture. And then they reported, the users reported that they're comfortable with sharing their animation because of a sense of anonymity that it gives, and also because the animation doesn't really tell the story, that mostly these stories are very personal, but they felt comfortable with sharing with them. So overall, through this design process and evaluation of it, we learned that personal objects and tangible objects kind of facilitated the unfamiliar process of an interactive film, especially for a general public. Through touching objects, seeing objects, hearing, reading about objects, they connected with the film and also with each other, the previous participants and future participants to come. Then also embracing the signs of experimenting with the medium, the signs of imperfections helped the future participants to feel comfortable and have a sense of openness to just experiment and don't adhere to the professional standards. And it actually helped participants to see, see first of all, their neglected objects, to remember memories or stories about their objects, and it mostly happened through the animation making, through touching the object, through carefully moving it. You can read about this in the paper in detail, that how the animation making process also happens actually. And this is a prototype. I mean, I didn't put the prototype there. So, and now, based on these insights, we are moving to production, which you can see in my website soon, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks again for the presentation. Do we have questions this time? Yes, great, even more.
Thanks so much for your presentation. I'm just wondering if through this process, I think you touched upon it at the end a little bit, were there kind of any more, let's say, narrative discussions on participants' experience of displacement that came out of this process of making stop motion? I don't know, with one another or with you, or yeah, just wondering.
It was, as I mentioned, it was not noticeable in the animations actually, but in the reflections that they had. They reported that it makes them appreciate an object, or that is related to, for example, their homeland. It makes them remember some people. So it's not the final animation that does that, but the process of choosing objects, reflecting on its qualities, moving it. It had some signs of relation to family, to homeland, to movement. So, yeah.
There is another question here.
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned that there's like a film at the end. Like, is there like how are you gonna like connect these objects together with a bigger narrative, like in a sense of a film?
Yes, there's a narrative overall in the film that it prompts some questions that if you had objects, if you had the object, what would you do? And then this narrative continues towards the end, and then talks about our objects keep these memories. There's a narrative that then we see all these animations created through it. And at the moment, we are editing by hand, but in the future, we want to use also AI to help us to connect these animations.
Okay, so you're basically connecting the animations together. There's no
Editing
like other,
part.
and there's like beginning, there's documentary part. Like, is there like an end to the film too, or like how does it?
Yes, kind of open end reflections.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. We would have time for one more question, if anyone. If not, yeah, I mean, thank you again. I also think it's great. I saw the link between your two projects now somehow. But to have a presentation in this session that does not specifically talk about AI, so I think that's also very good to have. And second round of applause for Nairi, please.
Thank you.
And we now come to the last paper presentation of Expanded 25. It's an art paper called Precious Camouflage, Artistic Research for the Creation of a Dance Piece with Humans and AI by Charlotte Dribusch.
Hi everybody, I'm so happy to see some familiar faces. My name is Charlotte. I'm a choreographer mainly and a dance researcher. I'm working with Mirevi Lab of Hochschule Düsseldorf, and I'm presenting today a tiny glimpse of our research for creating a dance piece with 4 dancers of my dance ensemble, but also 4 live AI systems. So mostly I'm an artist, and I'm working with a very peculiar material, which is the body, which is movement, which is dance and theory, and in combination with technology, being guided by philosophical questions. So jumping right into it, my work usually has 3 layers to it, which is the artwork itself, the research around it, and the mediation, and the presentation, obviously. But a thing that I'm also very interested in is recursion or resourcefulness, so always taking the research from one piece onto the next piece. And I really like to intertwine different projects to carry on the research that we're doing in general, to just not lose the thoughts that we had initially. So a lot of my work, which is not so unusual, but also in this dimension, it's quite unusual when we're talking about dance, is research. In my case, it's the scientific research that I'm doing with Mirevi Lab, like the development of the technology, papers, journals, conferences. But in our case, it is widened in its understanding, and I'm speaking of artistic research. So artistic research usually is distinguished from scientific research through its focus, that is focusing rather on finding particular forms rather than pure knowledge acquisition. So artistic research usually blends experimentation and interpretation to reveal more implicit knowledge that is embedded in the artistic practices, which actually forms a great link to Mona's presentation earlier. Unlike scientific research, which typically maintains a kind of a separation between the researcher and the object of study, in artistic research, the researcher is usually involved as an active participant in the creative process. So artistic research can preserve something that Kempf Jensen calls a felt knowledge, so an embodied and non-verbal insight that emerges through the artistic practice. So we usually distinguish between research about art, for art, and in art, with the latter being the most relevant to our work here right now. So things that I'm usually interested in all of my pieces is the artistic research, as mentioned, identity, systems, and technology, which leads usually also to the fact that I'm normally presenting the different systems and technologies that we are working with also as agents that we are working with also in the rehearsals. Agents themselves, a main meta topic of my work is agency, and another meta topic is ethics and body politics. So the project that I quickly want to present is called Precious Camouflage, a dance piece for 4 dancers and 4 live AI systems, but also jumping a little bit and showing you a little bit of the artistic research that we did. With the work itself, we question the relationships between artistic dance work and intelligent systems, and also trying to bring this communication and also miscommunication live on stage. We want to understand how systems are trained, but also constantly keep on training with them and learning from them. So a couple of months ago, well, actually a year ago, we had the premiere of Brushless Camouflage at Tanzhaus NRW in Düsseldorf. It's a 60-minute show, and the audience is allowed to look for a space where to sit in a 180-degree angle. So let's have a look at the trailer. Could you turn up the music a little bit? So after we have looked at those few impressions, a few words about the AI at the stage. So everything that you just saw is live generated in a kind of AI telephone game setup. So there's a live camera on stage, back on the left to record the events. We have one AI that is giving tags, so probabilities, what it appears to be looking at. One AI that is grammatically describing what can be seen. One AI that is illustrating the dance or an impression from the description, and one AI that interprets what is happening on the stage in water. So and that was an AI that we trained with 5,000 to 20,000 different water and liquid data ourselves. So here's another drawing or an excerpt from the paper on the agents loop, with agents being both the dancers but also the AI systems. So we created a feedback loop where the human movement, the dancer's movement, influences the AI interpretation on stage, which again influences back the human movement. Which actually right now, after a couple of months, leads me a little bit to think more of a helix shape than a loop shape, if I'm being very honest, because in my opinion, it's pretty impossible to describe or depict a situation without adding a taste of interpretation, which is also the piece about. So I don't think that a loop shape is adequate. I actually think it's a layering helix process. So the AIs, as just said, refer back, intervene in the choreography at certain points with their suggestions. But the choreography itself is quite fixed and built and developed in interaction with countless AI principles that we developed. And one of them I will very quickly present. You will have noticed that a spit is used repeatedly in the piece. So the drooling research is one of those 6 principles that I am presenting shortly. So based on the phenomenon of biases and the question of moralizing AI systems, the AI principle of drooling was developed. So ChatGPT, for example, generally refused to represent spit as a material, as it considered it to be disrespectful, a disrespectful representation of people. So only water flowing from the mouth was partially accepted in the context of humans or non-humans, such as drooling sculptures or human-like shapes made of spit, although ChatGPT actually didn't know what spit was about, so it was kind of inventing, making up what the materiality of a spit could be. And after endless discussions, some environments were defined as respectful by the AI, but nevertheless, I have a huge collection of rejections, which I actually discussed and used in the rehearsals with my dancers. And together with a lot of counter proposals that the system proposed, such as that it could show me some positive and artistic dance expressions instead. Finally, and with many workarounds, I managed to create some outputs, but well, actually the problem behind this is that AI is faced with the problem of reacting in an ethically neutral manner, and it's actually proof of the human intervention, but then again, machine intervention. So this is because the system decides when something seems morally justifiable and when it's not. So it seems as if the boundary of human agency differs from that of AI in terms of spit. So in the piece itself, but also in the entire research, the act of drooling is understood in the production as the boundary, as the marking boundary between the human and the machine, whereby the machine is to be taught to drool, but does not accept actually this act. So all of the, under these circumstances, all of the puddles that are appearing on stage take on the function of sacred altars of humanity that we are then posing on stage during the development of the piece. So evolving with this research around the drooling principle, one of the next outcomes after a couple of months was this.
Think of pickled cucumbers first, please. Let the resistance pull your mucous membranes, the little man's revolution like a gulp of zip itself. Janus' gaze full of water chews from the tip of your tongue, and they who do not know construct an idea. Performative is the word to the act, the raw trade of the inquisitive who fills the gaps with flowing saliva because, no, I am not sure. You are not sure what spit is. Starch in water thickens the political legacy of small realities, Micha. Within the spit, humanity spits. Drooling without control because every generation empties a bottle of water shows I'm not one. I'm not safe. I am not sure. I'm not sure what it is. Noted to power. Now let's have another quick pickle, shall we?
So what you just saw is one part of the series, I'm not sure. And I guess with a brief introduction on precious camouflage before, you may have an idea what where the drooling comes from. So this is just another layer that we added afterwards when we were experimenting with different AI systems and how we could possibly make them drool. So in the next project, I'm actually working again with the drooling and trying to make systems drool, so let's see. I just wanted to do another tiny circle. As I told you before, I like coming back and like using research and trying to convey it and mediate it and present it. And I was telling you that my work included those three layers of the artwork and the research and the mediation. So I wanted to show you quickly what I'm working on right now, which is a format of a lecture performance, which is actually documenting the entire research and philosophical constructions of precious camouflage in a graphic novel. It's thought as a lecture performance that is both a book and an app with AR content that enhances the sources and the experiences, rather in the form of a felt knowledge, so that the reader can actually experience what we as performers and dancers and researchers experienced meanwhile we were going through this research. Well, and what we are doing right now, we're touring with a piece still, we're iterating it. This is actually from 3 days ago when we were cleaning the stage right before the show. And actually the text says a person is cleaning the floor with a mop, possibly preparing or tidying up a space, so that is correct. We are iterating, we are preparing a publication on ethical implications of AI training data sets, and we are actually moving on with the research on drooling and the friendly and respectful interaction with AI systems. So this is it from us. I'm happy to hear questions. I'm also happy to get in touch when it comes to drooling and anything else.
Thank you so much. Please.
Hello. Sorry, maybe you said it and I missed it. So, did the drooling, was that intentional? Was that your plan to make the AI drool, or was this something that came up because it refused to do it?
Well, so the initial idea was to actually make use of the idea or principles how AIs are taught in our learning, and using those principles for the dances and the rehearsals. And then, after a very short experimentation phase, we realized that those systems would ignore all kind of human effects that are not wanted. And it actually turned out to be like sneezing or coughing or those kind of things. And then we tried to push it a little bit further and realized that it was with the drooling, and that actually dancers in the beginning became invisible when drooling because the systems refused to react with it. So it was kind of an invisibility cloak for us in the beginning, but after a while they just depicted the dancers without the drooling.
Just an add-on. You said that you had also feedback from the AI to the dancers. How did that work? I didn't get that.
Well, it depends, because actually we worked, like in the research, we worked with 15 different AI systems, so quite a lot. And on stage, we just have those 4 very simple and straightforward ones, which we chose because I wanted the audience to have the chance to understand what is going on. And in the live piece on stage, we call it reaction gaps. So it's a very fixed performance and show choreography, but there's always a couple of seconds, I think about, let's say, 25 or 30 moments in the piece when the dancers are actually taking the imagery of the big illustration and using it, fill it in the gaps, or taking it as a layer on top of the choreography.
Hey, thanks for your interesting presentation. I was just wondering how much research you've done into other artists working with body fluids. I'm thinking, for example, of the seminal experimental animation by Vicky Smith called Noisy Licking and Spitting, where she spits on a piece of film, spits paint from her mouth and makes onto analog film.
I don't know that one. I will definitely research it, but we did quite some research on it was also on spitting and on fluids coming from the mouth, but it was also on sweat, because that was another thing that we realized that AI was ignoring and also rejecting. So we were focusing a little bit more on the rejection, but in the paper and also in our current research, we're actually really trying to connect it with other artists' work.
Cool. Thank you very much again for your presentation. Another round of applause. So this now concludes the Expanded 25 academic program. We have in about 45 minutes at 4 p.m. Another panel, and then the big award ceremony at 6 p.m. Thanks everybody for being here, and see you later.